Today we're going to see if we can find the floor of the shop. Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. I thought today while I was cleaning up the disaster that is the shop, we could go over some of the things that we've been working on Michael's car. The heater box that we've been working on the last day or two has just snowballed into something I thought was going to be a little bit easier, but no worry, we will prevail, and we'll get it all taken care of. The big issue with the heater box is that the space behind the dash is limited, and so with the stock heater box, either the old style heater that Factory 5 supplied with the early Mark IV kits and before, or the newer one that they're supplying, which is more of like a hot rod style heater core assembly, you really can't run a glove box because there's just not enough depth behind the dash right here. And so what we're working on is I took the entire heater core box assembly, and first I tried to modify what was here and flipped it on its side rather than sitting kind of flat like it does, to see if we could free up some space that way. And it doesn't look like that's going to work. There's just not enough airflow through the heater core when you turn it on its side like that. So I think our next step is going to be, we've got the heater core itself mounted on the firewall, and what we're going to try to do is we're going to make a custom box that it doesn't have the same depth, meaning I guess it will be the same depth, but it'll be a little bit taller. And we've spaced the heater core off of the firewall probably 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, in the hopes that just circulating the air through the box will cause enough warmth to go through the fins of the heater core to allow some relatively good heating. The other thing that we've been working on is the wiring on the car, and I'll show you guys in detail some of that once I get some of the tools put away. But we've started on the wiring to the front of the car. We've got the fuse box mounted. Sometime this afternoon I'll probably start on the rear harness of the car. We want some of that stuff in place so we can get a layout of where everything's going to need to be terminated, because we need to still put weather pack connectors on all of the headlights, the tail lights, the front marker lights, and stuff like that. So we want to kind of get everything where it's going to be, so that some of these days where I may not have, more than an hour to work out in the shop, it's something little that I can do. I can just kind of take my wiring stuff in that one area. If it's just the front right of the car, I can make up the weather pack connectors for the headlight and the marker light on that side. And the next night I might have some time and I could do the other side. So you kind of get it. Even if you just spend an hour in the shop a night, at least you've got forward progress and forward momentum going. And when you can look back and you can see that you've actually gotten something done on the car, it's a lot more fulfilling than just looking back at the end of the week and say, oh, well, I couldn't get out to the shop because I just didn't have time. Even if you've only got 15 minutes, you can come out like today. I got a late start, and I figured the best thing to do was just going to be to clean up the shop, because as the intro states, I can't find the floor. I've got stuff everywhere. Over on the other side of the shop where I'm fabbing up aluminum panels, that area is a disaster. I need to go through that. I need to get all my metal scraps picked up off the ground. I need to get all of the pieces that are too small to be used for anything put in the recycle bin. I need to clean up a lot of the fat mat backing paper that comes off when you peel the backing off of that. It's just, it's been a week worth of work in the shop, and I haven't kept up on the cleaning. I'm sure some of you guys can relate to that. So, as I finish putting stuff away here, I'll grab the camera in a couple of minutes. I'll grab what I can to show you guys what exactly we've been working on the car, and give you a more up close and personal view on some of the stuff that has taken place over the last week. So with that, since I was talking about the heater, we might as well start in front with the heater blower motor. If you see, we've got it mounted to the firewall in about the spot that everyone mounts these on the Roadster kits. The difference here is that we've drilled a 3.5-inch hole in the top of the foot box. And if you can see, there's a black line we've got going here. That represents this top rail. And we're going to actually enclose the heater blower assembly so that we're pulling air from the foot box inside the car rather than in the engine compartment. Now, if the car was just going to be an open Roadster, probably wouldn't be a huge thing. There are probably hundreds of these cars out here running heaters with no tops on them, and no problem. The problem that I have, or we have, is that it's going to pull air in from under the hood, and there's no telling if there is an exhaust leak or something like that. That carbon monoxide is going to be pushed right into the car. Now, if you had a top and no windows, you know, what kind of effect would it have? My own car, Slytherin, which is over to my left, it has a hard top and no windows. We still contained the heater blower motor in that car in its own box. In that car, we actually pull fresh air from the front brake duct scoop to feed it fresh air, because we're using the heater blower motor not only for warm air, but we're using it for cool air to cool the foot boxes in the summertime when it's hot. We're not going to do that in this car. We're going to pull fresh air right here through this hole in the bottom. That hole is about the same size as the hole on the side of the blower motor where it actually pulls its air from. So I don't think there's going to be a problem with airflow. And then we're going to make it removable, because if the blower motor ever has to come out for service, let's say it needs to be replaced, this way at least you can get in there. And I'm just afraid if we pop riveted and silicone this like all the other aluminum panels on the car, it'll be a real tough extraction of that, because the body is going to be right over the top here. So if we can put the box, the fresh air box that we're going to make, in with some riv nuts and maybe some foam tape, I think that's going to work reasonably well if anybody ever had to pull the blower motor out to work on it. The wires that we've got, this ground wire and these three feed wires for the blower motor, we'll feed those in through the firewall inside of this fresh air box for the blower motor and into the cockpit of the car, and that way we can tie it to our switch. There are disconnects on these wires, so there's a quick disconnect here for the ground, and there's a quick disconnect on those for the power, and that's 3-speed fan, low, medium, high. We mounted the heater core up, and I've just got it mounted in there with a single quarter 20 bolt and nut, and it's just kind of loosely held on there now. It does move. I'm going to put another mounting bolt on this side of the heater core as well, and then we've got a box in this side as well. The problem that I had with the stock heater box or heater core heat exchanger box, the plastic one, was once I rearranged where the outlets were coming out of, there just wasn't enough airflow out of the outlets. And so we're going to reorient. We've already reoriented the heater core so it's flat against the firewall, and that's going to give us more room here for our glove box. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little taller in this area here, and maybe even angle it up. And then what I'm thinking about doing, these are the outlets that I pulled out of the plastic box. And what I'm thinking about doing is putting this one up here on the side of the heat exchanger box that we're going to make. We'll probably make this all out of 040 aluminum. And on this side, I'm going to put one right about here. And I'm going to try to maintain enough distance between the heater core itself and the actual heat exchanger box that we can get enough airflow for this. So that's the plan right now. Once I get that box mocked up, I will I'll probably shoot another video of it and let you guys see, you know, how that all turned out. My goal is to get as big of a glove box in here as we can. You can see between the front of the dash, which is going to be on the face of this tube, to the front of the heater core right now, we've got about 4 inches. And if I remember, when I measured the glove box that Michael picked up, it's about 5 inches deep. So I'm going to have to modify the glove box as well, and I'm going to have to make it a little bit shallower. But I don't think 1 inch is going to make a huge difference on the glove box, because at least it'll still be a usable glove box rather than if I had to cut it down to, you know, 2 inches or something like that. So there's that. I don't remember on the last video if we had the firewall in or not, but it's in. We've got our firewall support in, and I've got a couple of holes cut in that to make our wiring a little bit easier, because we've got the Holly system that I think we are going to mount down underneath here in the driver's foot the passenger's foot box, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to pass the wires for the Holly system out through here into the engine bay, similar to what is in the old Mark III assembly manual. That's my hope. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we'll see. The other thing that we did is we started on the fat mat, or the heat and sound mat, in the rest of the car on all the panels that we know will not be coming out. Michael mentioned something about wanting to add a radio, and so the back cockpit wall is kind of on hold until we figure out what we're going to do there. I don't know if we're going to cut in a package tray back here and then put a speaker box behind the package tray, or we're going to mount speakers in the back of the cockpit wall. So at this point, I'm not going to cover any of this or the trunk until we get that ironed out. I'm hoping that he'll make a trip out here this weekend. And Michael, if you are watching the video and I haven't gotten back and replied to your email about the missing parts, it is the parts for the radiator fan and the banjo bolts and some of the other stuff that we ordered this past, 2 weeks ago. The front of the car hasn't changed a whole lot, other than this fitting that we had just a miserable time getting the old one out. The old fitting, this is a like an air bleed port, so that when you fill up the coolant, you can fill the coolant up, and then as soon as you start to get coolant up through this hole, then of course you put this cap in. The problem that we had is the old one was seized in there, and the previous owner, or the builder, whoever built the car, rather than taking the time to get the old one out, just simply drilled and tapped into the top of the old one, and then put just a steel bolt in there with Teflon tape to seal it. And there was evidence it was leaking. So we did the right thing. We welded the bolt that they had previously put in the old fitting here to the fitting itself, and then we used the shoulders of the bolt to unscrew it, and it was in there pretty good, but we got it to break loose. And then Michael purchased this aluminum bolt or bleed screw, or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure I can look up exactly what they refer to it as, but this is a pretty nice piece. It's got double O-rings on it, similar to what the factory used, and then it threads right in there. And I just put a little bit of lubricant on the O-rings, and then I put a little anti-seize on the threads of the actual bolt itself. So hopefully we'll be able to get that thing out when we go ahead to add coolant to this when that time comes. I think what we'll do is we'll talk about the front harness. I've got the front harness run here. We went ahead and we added this 14 gauge wire. We're going to run this parallel with the existing cooling fan wire, and that's going to enable us to run the stock style Ford radiator fan. We need 40 amps, 40 to 45 startup amps for that fan to run properly. So with a parallel 14 gauge wire, we'll have no problems getting that fan to run. And then what we'll do here at the front is in the harness, you can see right down here, I've got the factory blue wire and then the yellow wire that we pulled out, and then the ground. Now the ground is pretty good size. I think that's a number 12. The problem is it also runs the headlights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap onto that ground, probably about 8 inches back into the harness here. And then I'm going to run another number 10 or number 12 ground to the chassis up here in the front. And then I'll probably weld in a ground stud. So we'll be able to make sure that that has enough ground regardless of whether the headlights are on or not. So that's run through here. I ran the harness through the existing hole, and lucky for me, I hold on to all these extra pieces when a kit comes through and we don't use these on the newer Mark IVs, and it just goes right in spot there. We've got a couple of holes drilled for it. We haven't siliconed that in yet because we still got the master cylinder that has to go in here and everything else, and so I don't want to make anything permanent until I know that everything in that area is going to fit the way it needs to. We did get the fuse box mounted, and it's not Ron Francis bashing. However, it just seems as though I always have at least one issue with these Ron Francis harnesses. This time it was this wire for the inertia switch. The inertia switch is what grounds the relay for the fuel pump. And this wire had pulled out of the terminal down in here on the back of the relay. And we pulled it out of the box that way. So tip for any of you out there builders, go ahead and tug on all of the wires going into the back of the fuse box just to make sure that they're crimped nice and securely, because once the body goes on, you know, you can't get to that as easily. I mean, granted, you can drop the fuse panel down, but it's still, you know, working inside the foot box, especially if you're a big guy, it ain't easy, especially with the steering wheel, the seat, the door, and all that stuff in your way. So before you even put this in the car, you know, make sure that all those terminals are connected and they're secure. We did prep this for the Holley terminator system. We're going to have the Holley activate this relay, and so we went ahead and we cut this wire. This is what's going to get 12 volts from Holley to turn the fuel pump on and off. We're actually going to keep the main supply power as part of the Ron Francis harness. And that way, all the fuses that run the major components of the car are going to still be in the fuse box that's in the Ron Francis harness. That way, there's really little to no chance that the Holley fuse will ever blow, because it's only providing, you know, what, maybe a half an amp to activate the relay that's in the Ron Francis harness. While we're talking about that, we'll have a little flashback to the Texas car, and I had my Ford EVTM, which is their electrical and vacuum troubleshooting manual, and I went through this only because I was worried about running a bigger wire to the back of the car for the fuel pump on Michael's Mark III. And so I started looking at the fuel pump, and if you can see, the fuel pump is a 20 amp. So Ford ran a 20 amp circuit to the back of the car for a stock, what is it, a 90 liter per hour pump? And Ron Francis is only providing a 15 amp fuse for what Factory 5 is providing as a 255 liter per hour pump. So that's a head scratcher, guys. I've checked the wire size and the length, and it looks to me that the wire size that's in the Ron Francis harness is going to be adequate all the way up to 20 amps at the length of wire from the actual fuse box relay. So we're gonna do the same thing here. We're just gonna up the fuse on the fuel pump to a 20 from the 15, and see how that all pans out. We have heard from Ed and his Texas car, and he hasn't had any fuel pump issues since he left California. So I'm hoping that issue is solved, and we're gonna go with the same solution on this car here too. So we did get the fuse box all mounted. We've got the main harness in the car. We're going to go ahead in the next couple of days, and we're going to start terminating some of this stuff. So like the inertia switch, you know, that's going to probably go up over here. We've got the main ground, which we're going to have to lengthen because I want that to land on the ground stud that we put in here. I'm not a big fan of self-tapping screws into the frame for a ground. Then we're probably going to run a ground in the rear harness for the fuel pump, a secondary ground, just like we did on Ed's car when it came back here. And that'll be when we go ahead and we put the rear harness in. So I think we should be caught up. Yeah, I think we're all caught up. All right, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. As you can see, between the beginning of the video and the end of the video, I did manage to clean up the shop. I want to thank you guys all for watching. Again, I can't believe that as many of you are watching the videos as you are, and we seem to be getting subscribers, even though I'm not begging for subscriptions. So. Again, thank you. I appreciate it. We're just trying to get info out to those of you out there building these cars, and we want to give you as much support as we can. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. I think tomorrow I'm going to see if we can't get the transmission out of this. I think it's a Tremec 3650, and it needs to go in. The synchros in third gear are shot, so. We're going to see if we can't get the transmission out and get it all set up for Michael to pick up so he can take it to whoever he's going to have repair it. Other than that, again, thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. Have a good day.